Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel and the continuation in my course. We've got loads of great stuff coming up for you in this session. We're going to be looking at balancing a mix with a timer, or we're going to be looking at all the essential meters that you need in your sessions and loads more. Let's get into it. Before we jump into this video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up if you enjoy it, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell so you know when future videos are up and coming. If you're looking to grab some extra equipment for your studio at home, you can use my affiliate link for Thomann. Doesn't cost you anything extra, just means a little bit gets kicked back to me and helps me keep making content for you guys. So let's do it. Okay, we've been talking about setting up a mix, we've been talking about how to get your mix balanced really effectively, and one really important thing to focus on is not spending too much time fussing over it. You can get really caught up in, a tiny little adjustment here, a tiny little movement there. And the thing is that when you're balancing your mix initially, it's just the starting point, because you're going to be processing things with EQ and compression and adding effects and other things later on in your mix. So you only need to get yourself, a kind of a rough place to start from at this initial kind of step. So what I'm going to encourage you to do is to practice balancing your mix with a timer, which I'm going to show you with this new mix here. So I've got this session, I've got a timer set up. This plugin is free. If you want to grab it, it's from this company Hoffer. It's called 4U Plus Project Time. It's just set up there as a plugin on my stereo out. I'm going to hit go on this timer and I'm going to balance this mix in real time, and you can watch me do it, and let's see how long it takes me to do it. Ready? Let's go. Clock is ticking.
Messages from you lately. We used to slide into the DMs, from the AMs to the PMs. Remember that? Don't put me on hold. I need somebody to hold. Why am I on hold? If I'm on hold, I'm gonna scream. Their messages from you lately. We used to slide into the DMs, from the AMs to the PMs. Remember that? Remember that? Don't put me on hold. We used to slide into the DMs, from the AMs to the PMs. Their messages from you lately. We used to slide into the DMs, I need somebody to hold. Why am I on hold? If I'm on hold, I'm gonna scream. If I'm on hold, I'm gonna scream. I'm not trying to say doing something shady, but I don't think I've had any messages from you lately. We used to slide into the DMs from the AMs to the PMs. Remember that? Don't put me on hold. I need somebody to hold. Why am I on hold? If I'm on hold, I'm gonna scream. If I'm on hold, I'm gonna scream.
5 minutes. There you go. Mix up and running, balanced as a starting point, ready to go in 5 minutes flat. Now, is this going to be perfect? No, it's not going to be perfect. There are going to be things that are going to need to move and change, but it's given me a balanced starting point to work from in a really quick amount of time. Now, what have I been listening for there? Well, as you'll have noticed, I used the mixing hierarchy when I was bringing these elements into this mix. So I started off with my percussion, with my drums and my hand percussion. I added in the bass, and then I went to the vocal straight away. I got the vocal in a nice prominent place in that mix so that I knew it was going to sit forward. Then everything else, I supplemented around that. So after the vocal, I brought in the other melodic elements. So I brought in the horns, and then I brought in the guitars and the keys that were doing more kind of harmonic accompaniment. And by bringing things in that order, it allowed me to slot them in really kind of quickly and easily because I could hear how they were kind of balancing in relationship to that lead vocal. That was really important. It meant that I wasn't putting things overpowering the lead vocal. I was making sure things were kind of supplementing and supporting it.
I need somebody to hold. Why am I on hold?
I can hear the vocal on top of everything in that context. That's really, really vital. Okay, so I've got a balanced mix up and running. Let's talk about buses. I can get rid of that timer for now. Now you'll see that all of my instrument tracks I've got organised into, in Logic, they're track stacks. You can use whatever your DAW organises your tracks into. But they're just buses. So you'll see that all of the drum tracks here, they're all going out of bus 1, and this track stack is bus 1, okay? Now, you'll notice that all of the buses are at 0, okay? They're at unity gain. So I haven't adjusted the level of any bus at this point. That's really, really key. Why is that key? Because if I find that once I've balanced this mix, I've got this mix kind of up and running, I'm then too loud or too quiet, I can then adjust everything just by grabbing all these buses and moving them up and down. So, for example, let's have a look at where we are, I don't know, towards the end.
My phone. Is it just your plan?
Okay, so I'm up at like minus 1.2 on my mix bus. That's a bit louder than I want to be on my mix bus. If I've already got all my buses all over the place because I've decided, I want to turn all of the guitars up or all of the vocals up or whatever, then it's less easy to adjust the relative level. Because they're all at unity, I can just grab them all and say, okay, I want to give myself another 4 dB of headroom, so I'm going to bring them all down by 4 dB. And then I've got the headroom that I want.
Is it just your plan? Now, baby.
And now my headroom is at a more sensible place. So by leaving your buses at unity whilst you're balancing your mix, it means that when you need to go in and adjust the whole level of everything, you can still leave your mix bus at unity, leave that at 0 because you want that as your kind of output reference point. That's going to stay at 0, but I can adjust the level of everything kind of together as an extra kind of safety net, an extra layer of control before things get to my mix bus. That's a really, really great tip. So keep your buses at unity as long as you possibly can, and then you can use them to balance the overall level going into your mix bus. Okay, let's talk about meters. What meters do we need to be keeping an eye on during our mix process? We're just balancing our mix, remember, but these meters that we're going to talk about now they apply to our whole mix process all the way through. So first thing we've got are our channel meters. Let's refresh our memories, okay? I'm just going to set up a nice long loop here and let's solo out our drums. Now remember, the meters on your channels are what are called peak meters. They're full scale peak meters. So they show you the loudest points, okay? Now at the moment, all these channels are set up as post fader meters. So you'll see that the fader comes after the meter. That means that whatever level I've adjusted on the fader is going to be reflected on the output on the meter, okay? That's cool, that's fine. I know that because I've gain staged this project correctly, which we've learned from our previous videos, which you can see linked up there somewhere or down in the description. Because we've gain staged correctly, we know that we're not going to be clipping, we're not going to be peaking or overloading these channels. If I were, however, doing things with plugins and maybe working on some EQ or some compression, then I'd want to have my pre-fader metering visible here as well. And remember, on Logic, I've just got the little button there that I can toggle and engage. And it's always worth checking two things. So remember, pre-fader metering is showing us what's going on before the level gets to the faders. Okay, so I can check that my levels are sensible, they're not too hot. So this level here is showing my pre-fader levels. You can see that everything is at a healthy level, nothing is going in the red, nothing's too loud. If I flip over to the post-fader, you'll see that things are a bit quieter because, with the exception of my overheads, which is up at Unity, everything else is now down lower. I've pulled the faders down, so of course that's going to be quieter than the pre-fader metering option. So understanding your pre and post fader metering and how they're reflected on your full scale peak meters is really important. What else have we got set up here? Well, on our mix bus, we have our VU meter. We use that for gain staging, for trimming things in. But how should that look at this stage in time? What sorts of levels should you be expecting on your VU meter? Well, a good target at this stage is for your meter on the kind of fuller, louder sections to be around about your 0 dB VU mark. Okay, so that nice loud moment there, one of the loudest moments in this track, that's kind of pushing up above 0 dB VU, around about that 0 dB VU mark. That shows that we're in a healthy place right now. We've gain staged correctly, okay? So on your VU meter, for your louder sections, you're looking to be around that 0 dB VU mark. If you push over, that's fine. It's not the same as your channels where if you go in the red, you're clipping. This is a VU meter, it works in a different way. So if you're going above in the louder sections, that's cool. I've got my VU meter. I've also got a correlation meter here, remember, which was showing us the difference between the left and right sides. So I'm nicely in the plus here, and remember, if I flip to mono, so if I sum my mix down to mono, that's going to allow us to hear what's going to happen if our mix is summed to mono. Obviously, at the moment, there aren't many things panned in this, so there isn't much of that kind of big difference between the left and right sides. But nonetheless, there are some stereo tracks. So, for example, I've got stereo keyboards. I've got stereo overheads on my drum kit. I've got stereo overheads on my percussion. So there are some differences between the left and right sides of my mix. Hence, you're seeing that we kind of got some variation here in our correlation meter. I've got a correlation meter set up. That's really important. Something else that is a really important tool to have set up is what's called an FFT meter. Now, FFT stands for Fast Fourier Transform, which is a totally unhelpful name. Here's a really good one. This is a free one. This is by Vox & Go. This is called Span. Now, by default, it'll look something like this, and it'll show you some sort of representation like this. Now, it's basically, if I hold that spectrum there, it basically shows us all of the frequency content that is there and present in our mix. So you can see that I've got a pretty full spectrum ranging from the low end down at kind of 30 hertz up to where it kind of rounds out at kind of 80 hertz here. And then a relatively balanced spectrum all the way up to 20 kilohertz. Now, that's useful in some kind of context. What I actually prefer to do is set this up as a kind of a mid-side meter. Now I have this set up as my default, but look at the difference here when I show it in this mid-side configuration. Okay, so the green lump, if you like, is the mid information, the information that's in the center of the mix. The kind of red orangey look is what's on the side of the mix. How do I set this up in this meter? Well, first of all, in your routing option, you need to have your mid-side stereo option selected. And then in your underlay, you tell it to underlay the sides of your mix. Okay, you can change the colors here. And then importantly, in the settings, I've got these numbers set up. So the release time is at 750, so it's a much slower time for it to kind of return back to being off. And the peak level hold time is at 1000. Okay, so it's basically a second, 1000 milliseconds. What that does is give us this much slower response in the FFT meter, allowing us to see more clearly what information is there and present. Why is this useful? Why do I have it in mid-side mode? Well, because I want to make sure that the information in the sides is going to complement what's in the middle. I don't want the sides being louder than the middle of the mix. That's going to be weird. I don't want the sides having loads of low-end content, loads of bass content, because that's going to sound weird. So at the moment, it looks pretty simple. But what you'll find is, as you EQ things, as you compress things, as you pan things, the difference between the mid and the side image here will become less and less. What you want to ensure as you're monitoring your FFT meter is that your sides don't kind of overtake your mids. You don't want loads of additional high-end content in your sides that is louder than your mids. You don't want loads of low-end content in your mix that is louder than your mids. So that's a really useful thing to have set up. We'll talk much more about it later on in other videos, but have an FFT meter set up there, ready to go, and that's really useful. If you use this meter, Vox & Go's Spam, you'll see it's also got a correlation meter here. So if I play it, you'll see I've got the correlation meter here, which means that I don't therefore need this correlation meter there. So that's one less thing that I have set up in my mix. And at the moment, that's all I need. I've got obviously the peak meters that are all there as default. I've got a VU meter and I've got Spam, which is my FFT meter and correlation meter. Those are all the meters I need set up in my session. Now, one other really important thing to think about is the concept of giving yourself additional opportunities to control elements in your mix by splitting things up onto individual tracks. So let's, for example, take a listen to this guitar part here. Okay, so let's hypothetically say that part of this guitar track used this kind of crunchy, clean but crunchy tone that we can hear here, but then another section used a different tone. Maybe the guitarist changed to a clean tone, or maybe he went from playing with a plectrum to fingerstyle partway through. Those tones are going to sound different. They might have slightly different volume levels. There are going to be discrepancies between them. Rather than just trying to control all of that on one channel, what I could do is to split things up onto separate channels. So to do that, let's say maybe this is predominantly the crunch guitar. All I do is duplicate it, make a copy, and then let's say this section here is what I need to split onto another track. I can just mark here, split it. I can then delete that from there, delete that from there. Then I can go and adjust these crossover points individually, like this. Go to the end of the region. Go and decide exactly where it is that I want those to end. And split those things that I can then control this, hypothetically, let's call it a clean channel, on its own separate channel. It might be that that needs to be louder. It might be that it'll need some different EQ. It might need different compression settings. But by having things split up onto their own individual channels, it makes them much easier to process down the line, because you can go in and control things without worrying about other elements of different tones that you might be affecting as a kind of a knock-on effect. The same thing applies to any vocals. So it might be, for example, in this track we've got, okay, let's take a look at this lead vocal here, for example.
I think there's something wrong with my phone.
Okay, kind of verse section.
Did you forget? My phone ain't even ringing. What's up with that? Don't put me on hold.
Okay, so let's just say, for whatever reason, that phrase, don't put me on hold, that's the hook, and maybe we want to process that differently. Same thing, we're going to go marquee it out, duplicate this channel. We can even just drag that one region over so that we can process it differently. Simple as that. It's all about control. It's all about being able to control as many different aspects of this mix as we can without creating any extra work for ourselves. And from there, you've got all the skills that you need to balance a mix really quickly. You can get up and running, you can get things gain staged, you can get things trimmed, you can balance your mix really, really quickly, which puts you in a really solid place moving forward. So next time we're going to be starting to explore the world of EQ, thinking about what it is that we're trying to achieve with EQ, thinking about the different sorts of equalizer there are out there available to us and how we implement them. So I'll see you in the next one.